Hey guys, welcome back to another evening together, another journey through time as we drift towards sleep. Tonight, we rest our heads in the cradle of ancient wisdom, in the shadow of mountains that have witnessed millennia of human searching. Dim the lights if you haven't already. Find that perfect position where your body feels heavy, where the day's tension begins to dissolve into the softness beneath you. Tonight, we speak of a prophet whose words still echo across 3,000 years. A man who spoke of light while surrounded by darkness, who preached of truth in an age of uncertainty, who dared to imagine one God when the world worshipped many, Zoroaster, Zarathustra, a name that tastes ancient on the tongue, a figure who shaped the spiritual destiny of empires, yet remains as elusive as morning mist. A prophet who spoke of the eternal battle between good and evil before such concepts had names in most human tongues. A teacher whose ideas would later whisper through Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, though few remember to credit their source. Isn't it strange? The most influential ideas often come from the most obscure beginnings. The quietest voices sometimes echo the longest through history's corridors. The smallest flames cast the longest shadows. Let me know in the comments what country and city you're watching from, and what time it is right now. I imagine some of you watching as twilight bathes your windows, others in the deepest part of night, when the world grows quiet enough to hear ancient voices. Some may be seeking refuge from insomnia, others simply wishing to drift into dreams, with stories of the past as gentle companions. Wherever you are, however you came to be here, know that sleep is welcome during our journey. These words are meant to accompany you, not demand your constant attention. Like the ancient oral traditions that once carried Zoroaster's wisdom from generation to generation, these words will still be here whether you're fully present or drifting between worlds. The ancient Zoroastrians believed that sleep was a vulnerable state, a time when the soul temporarily leaves the body to wander. They would pray for protection before closing their eyes. But you need no such prayers tonight. History itself will stand guard, wrapping around you like a blanket woven from time. Only if this calms you, only if these journeys through the past bring you peace, consider subscribing to join us again. Like the eternal flame that burns in Zoroastrian temples, this space remains lit for whoever seeks its warmth. No pressure, no urgency, just an open door. And now, as your breathing slows, as your thoughts begin to settle like dust after a desert wind, let us travel back, past empires risen and fallen, past libraries burned and rebuilt, past 1,000 generations of dreamers not so different from yourself. Back to a time when the stars seemed closer, when fire was mystery and miracle, when a single voice began a conversation that would outlive civilizations. You wake in the dark, not the comfortable darkness of your bedroom with its familiar shadows, but a primal darkness, vast, ancient, unbroken by artificial light. The air feels different here, thinner, sharper. Each breath fills your lungs with the scent of wild sage and sun-baked earth. Something about this darkness feels older than the darkness you know. Your eyes adjust slowly. Above you, stars crowd the sky in numbers you've forgotten existed. They hang low and bright, casting just enough light to outline the jagged horizon of mountains against the night canvas. You are somewhere in what will someday be called Iran, but that name means nothing here. Here, it is simply the land, Arianum, Veja, the Iranian expanse, a cradle of harsh beauty where human history is still young. You rise. The ground beneath your feet is hard, packed by countless seasons of sun and wind and occasional rain. Somewhere distant, a dog barks, one of the first animals to join its fate with humankind, already ancient partners in this time. The sound bounces between mountain walls before dissolving into silence. The cold surprises you. Despite the lingering memory of yesterday's heat that radiates from stones around you, The night air bites at your skin. This is the rhythm of the high plateau. Scorching days, freezing nights, a land of extremes that shapes everything that grows here, including ideas. You begin walking, drawn by something you cannot name. The landscape reveals itself in pieces as your eyes continue to adjust. Tough, scrubby plants grip the soil tenaciously. A small stream cuts through rock, singing quietly to itself. The mountains loom, sentinels that have watched the slow dance of nomadic tribes for uncounted generations. Dawn approaches hesitantly, first as a faint silver outline along the eastern peaks, then spreading like water across the sky. Colors return to the world, the reddish-brown of rocky soil, the muted green of drought-resistant vegetation, the pale blue of morning sky scraped clean by altitude. With light comes life. Birds call to one another, each species announcing its continued survival. Small creatures rustle in the sparse undergrowth, and in the distance, plumes of smoke rise from human encampments, some settled, others temporary. Civilization here exists in pockets, in fragile agreements between nature's harshness and human stubbornness. You smell it before you see it, the sacred fire. Not the wild, threatening flames of natural disaster that early humans feared, but controlled fire, tended fire, human fire. It burns in a small stone enclosure where figures move in morning ritual. Their language, if you could understand it, would sound strange to your ears, related to Sanskrit, an early form of what scholars will later call Indo-Iranian. In their words live the roots of Persian, but also faint connections to your own. Language bridges across millennia. The people you observe move with purpose. Their clothing is simple, but sufficient, woven from wool, designed for function in this unforgiving climate. They wear their history in their gestures, in how they greet the morning sun with raised hands, in how they tend their animals with practiced efficiency. These are people balanced between nomadic pastoralism and the early stirrings of settled agriculture, between the freedom of movement and the security of permanence. You watch a shepherd lead sheep up a hillside path worn by generations of similar journeys. His staff, a simple wooden tool, connects him to ancestors who performed the same task in the same way. His songs, hummed quietly to soothe the animals, carry melodies that would sound somehow familiar to any human ear. Near the settlement, a woman draws water from a well. The rope cuts into her calloused hands, hands that know the weight of daily survival. The water reflects the morning light as it breaks the surface, a small miracle repeated countless times each day. She nods to you as though you belong here, as though the thousands of years separating your worlds mean nothing in the simple acknowledgement of shared humanity. Children dash between simple dwellings, their laughter a universal language. They play games whose rules have been forgotten in your time, but whose purpose remains unchanged. Teaching cooperation, competition, the skills of survival dressed as entertainment. They are simultaneously of their specific moment in history and timeless, as all children are. The day warms. You feel the sun's strength increasing minute by minute. People move to shaded areas to continue their work, weaving, tool-making, food preparation. An old man sits cross-legged, eyes closed, lips moving in what might be prayer or might be poetry. The distinction hardly matters here. Near him, a younger man listens intently. There is something different about this younger figure, a quality of separateness, of seeing beyond what others see. He asks questions that make the older man pause, that sometimes make him frown or shake his head. Questions about why things are as they are, about the nature of the world's order, about the gods their tribe has always known. You are drawn to this questioning figure, sensing something momentous in his discontent. Could this be him, the one, whose ideas will spread across continents, influencing religions yet unborn? Is this Zoroaster, before revelation transformed him from questioner to prophet? or simply another human searching for meaning in a world of mystery and hardship. Whoever he is, whatever he will become, he exists now in this moment of perfect ordinariness, a man sitting in morning sunlight thinking thoughts that have not yet changed the world. History happens this way, not with thunderclaps and pronouncements, but in quiet moments when someone looks at the familiar and sees what others have missed. The wind picks up, carrying dust and the scent of distant grasslands. It whispers across your skin like time itself, transient, constant, impossible to grasp. The people here live by its patterns, reading weather and seasons in its changing moods. They know without meteorological instruments when to plant, when to harvest, when to seek shelter. Their knowledge is intimate, immediate, earned through generations of careful observation. A hawk circles overhead, riding thermal currents with effortless mastery. The young questioning man watches it too, his expression suggesting he sees more than just a bird, perhaps a metaphor, perhaps a message. In this world, the boundary between the natural and supernatural remains permeable. Every event might be a communication from forces beyond human understanding. You walk farther, beyond the settlement to where the land opens into expansive plateaus. Herds of goats and sheep dot the landscape, each animal a living investment against future hunger. Their keepers stand in solitary vigilance, human figures made small by the vastness around them, yet there is dignity in their stance, in their willingness to face such immensity with nothing but a wooden staff and inherited knowledge. The wind carries whispers of a name that will echo through millennia, though the man himself remains unknown to most who live alongside him. Names gain power slowly, accumulating significance like rivers gather tributaries. The name Zarathustra or Zoroaster still belongs only to a man, not yet to history, but somewhere in these harsh landscapes, ideas are taking shape that will outlast empires. Contradiction lives in the heart of history. The most important figures often leave the faintest footprints. Those who shape our world frequently vanish into the very changes they create. Such is the paradox of Zoroaster, a prophet whose words transformed civilizations, yet whose life remains shrouded in the mist of speculation. You feel this uncertainty as you move through a landscape that might, or might not, have witnessed his birth. Was it here, among the rugged mountains of eastern Iran, or perhaps in the regions now called Azerbaijan? The ground beneath your feet holds its secrets. Having long ago absorbed any definitive evidence, the earth remembers everything but tells us little. Scholars argue across millennia about when this prophet walked these lands. Some place him as early as 1700 BCE, others as late as 600 BCE, a span of 11 centuries where this pivotal figure might exist. Such imprecision would be unthinkable for modern figures, yet it seems fitting for a man whose teachings transcended ordinary time. The morning continues to brighten around you. In a nearby settlement, a woman gives birth. Her cries merge with those of her newborn, pain and new life inseparable as they have always been. The midwife works with practiced hands, her knowledge passed down through generations of women who have guided this transition countless times. Is this ordinary child the one who will hear divine wisdom? Probably not. But someone, somewhere, in a scene not unlike this one, entered the world destined to reshape it. Some traditions say Zoroaster laughed at birth instead of crying, a miraculous sign of his special nature. Others claim his brain pulsated so strongly it pushed away a hand placed on his head, indicating the powerful intellect he would develop. Stories grow like this, layer by layer, as people try to make sense of extraordinary impact through extraordinary origins. The need to believe that greatness announces itself from the beginning. You watch the mother cradle her newborn, whispering prayers for protection from evil spirits. In this world, such dangers feel immediate and real. Every family knows stories, of children claimed by mysterious illnesses, by accidents without explanation. The boundaries between the seen and unseen worlds remain thin and permeable. Every birth is both joy and terrible vulnerability. A group of children plays nearby, kicking, a ball made from animal bladder and hide. Their shouts and laughter fill the air with a timeless sound. Was the young Zoroaster once among such groups? Did he play the same games, share the same innocent pleasures? Or was he already separate, marked by a seriousness beyond his years, asking questions that made adults uncomfortable? Some accounts describe his father as a nobleman named Purushaspa, his mother as Dugdova. The names feel strange on your tongue, but remind you that every historical figure, no matter how mythologized, began with parents who gave them a name, who held them close, who worried about their future. Behind every world-changing idea stands a child who was once taught to speak, to walk, to see the world through particular eyes. The village you wander through subsists primarily on cattle herding. Animals represent both wealth and survival here. Young boys learn to care for the herds from the moment they can walk steadily. Their connection to these animals is intimate. Knowing each by sight, understanding their habits, reading early signs of illness or distress. This pastoral knowledge forms the background of early Zoroastrian thought, with its emphasis on caring for creation, on the sacredness of the natural world properly tended. A priest performs rituals near a small fire. His chants belong to the polytheistic tradition that dominated before Zoroaster's revelations, prayers to nature deities, to gods of specific places and functions. You recognize elements that will later be reformed and reinterpreted in Zoroaster's teachings, the raw spiritual material that awaits transformation. Ideas rarely emerge from nothing. Even revolutions build upon what came before. The uncertainty of Zoroaster's origins seems appropriate for a figure who would teach about the unseen, about truths beyond physical evidence. Perhaps history's amnesia serves a purpose here, forcing us to focus on the message rather than the messenger, on the lasting impact rather than the momentary circumstances. You notice an older child sitting apart from others, watching the flight of birds with unusual intensity. Something in his gaze suggests he sees patterns others miss, connections between earth and sky that remain invisible to ordinary perception. Is this the future prophet? Or merely a thoughtful child, one of countless individuals who look deeper than their peers? History teases with such possibilities, never confirming, always suggesting. The sun climbs higher, and people retreat to shade where possible. Daily work continues, women grinding grain between stones, men repairing tools worn from use, children carrying water from the distant well. The rhythm of survival beats steadily, the background against which all human innovation unfolds. Even prophets must eat, must drink, must learn the basic skills of their time and place. You pass a group of elders sharing stories beneath a crude shelter. Their tales mix history and myth without clear distinction. Stories of tribal migrations, of conflicts with neighboring peoples, of unusual weather and its consequences, of ancestors who performed remarkable deeds. This oral tradition, passed from generation to generation, forms the primary education for children gathered around them. Knowledge here travels through memory and voice, vulnerable yet surprisingly resilient. One elder speaks of ancient wisdom, of the proper way to maintain ritual purity, of how to keep favor with the gods who control natural forces. His certainty feels solid, unshakable. Yet within a generation or two, a young man will challenge these certainties, will propose a radically different understanding of divine nature and human purpose. That revolution waits quietly in the future, not yet disturbing the confident pronouncements of established tradition. Mountains loom on the horizon, their peaks touching clouds that gather and disperse in constant motion. The landscape itself seems to teach dualism, The contrast between valley and peak, between water and desert, between fertile soil and barren rock. Perhaps the seeds of Zoroaster's cosmic dualism, his vision of opposing forces of good and evil, were planted by the very geography that surrounded him from birth. You notice how people here acknowledge the elements, bowing slightly toward the sun, taking care not to pollute water sources, treating fire with careful reverence. These instinctive acknowledgements of nature's power will later be formalized in Zoroastrian practice, elevated from simple survival wisdom to religious observance. The line between practical knowledge and spiritual insight remains blurry, each informing the other. A sudden dust storm approaches from the west, turning day briefly to twilight. People scramble to protect food, to gather animals, to secure anything that might blow away. Their responses are immediate, practiced, without panic. They have weathered such storms before and will weather them again. This resilience in the face of natural disruption characterizes the people who inhabit these harsh regions. Adaptable, tenacious, prepared for sudden change. As dust fills the air, reducing visibility to arm's length, you feel the disorientation that comes with losing familiar reference points. Perhaps this mirrors the historical uncertainty surrounding Zoroaster. Clarity obscured, details lost, only the broad outlines remaining visible. Yet even in this obscurity, you sense direction and purpose. Some truths remain accessible even when specifics blur. The storm passes as quickly as it arrived. People emerge from shelter, resuming interrupted tasks with minimal complaint. Life continues its course, the momentary disruption already becoming memory. But in this ambiguity lies a certain truth. All profound ideas emerge from the mist of time, shaped by forces both known and unknowable, children of specific circumstances yet somehow transcending them. The river flows before you, its surface catching morning light in countless tiny explosions of brilliance. Water moving over stone creates a sound both random and rhythmic. Nature's oldest music, played on instruments shaped by millennia of patient erosion. You stand where tradition says a 30-year-old man once stood, at the precise moment when personal history transformed into world history. This river has no special marker, no shrine or temple announcing its significance. It continues its journey toward distant seas, unaware of the role it played in human spiritual evolution. Most pivotal locations share this quality. Their outward appearance rarely matches their historical importance. The cosmos doesn't provide convenient signposts for its most profound revelations. Zoroaster came here for ordinary reasons: to draw water, to perform ritual ablutions, perhaps simply to think in solitude. Routine actions in unremarkable settings often precede extraordinary moments. The mundane serves as doorway to the transcendent, though we rarely recognize the threshold until we've already crossed it. The air feels different somehow, clearer, more vibrant with potential. Birds call to one another from the scattered trees lining the riverbank. Their voices sound almost like questions, like the natural world itself participates in the human search for meaning. You notice how the flowing water never hesitates at obstacles but simply finds new paths forward. Persistence without struggle, adaptation without loss of purpose. According to the traditions, it was here that Zoroaster first encountered Vohumana, the good mind or good purpose, the first of several divine entities who would reveal themselves to him. The texts describe this not as a thunderous apparition, but as a presence that manifested first as a question: who are you? To whom do you belong? Questions, not answers, initiated this spiritual revolution. Not proclamations from above, but inquiries that invited self-examination. You try to imagine the moment, a man alone by water suddenly confronted with a presence both external and somehow deeply familiar, as though meeting a part of himself he never knew existed. The physical world around you continues its ordinary business. Insects hover over the water's surface. Fish create momentary ripples as they feed. Downstream, someone washes clothing, the rhythmic sound of fabric against stone carrying clearly in the morning air. Against this backdrop of normalcy, a human consciousness expanded beyond recognized boundaries. Vohumana led Zoroaster into the presence of Ahura Mazda, the wise Lord, the uncreated creator, the source of all positive existence. Not through physical transportation, but through an interior journey that transcended spatial limitations. The prophet stood by this river, yet simultaneously entered a realm beyond material existence, a paradoxical experience beyond easy categorization. You notice how the light changes as clouds move across the sun, moments of brilliance alternating with gentle shadow. This natural rhythm seems to echo the described experience of divine revelation. Clarity followed by uncertainty, understanding followed by confusion, each state temporary, each giving meaning to the other. What did Zoroaster see? The texts speak of a being of light and wisdom, perfect and complete, source of all positive creation. But such descriptions inevitably fall short. Human language straining against the limitations of communicating transcendent experience. Words become inadequate vessels for carrying certain truths, like trying to contain the river before you in cupped hands. You sit by the water's edge, watching its constant movement. The experience of revelation must have been similarly dynamic, not a static vision frozen in time, but an ongoing disclosure, unfolding through dialogue rather than monologue. The prophet asked questions. The divine answered. New questions arose from those answers. Understanding deepened through this exchange, this relationship between seeker and sought. Birds land nearby, regarding you with casual interest before resuming their search for food. Their indifference to human concerns feels strangely comforting. Divine revelation didn't stop nature's cycles or suspend physical laws. The extraordinary nested within the ordinary, the cosmic within the mundane. After the most profound spiritual experience of his life, Zoroaster still needed to eat, to drink, to find shelter from weather's extremes. The revealed truth centered on dualism, not the separation of spirit and matter that would characterize later Greek thought, but a moral dualism. Two primordial spirits existed, Spenta Mainyu, the bounteous spirit associated with Ahura Mazda, and Angra Mainyu, the destructive spirit. These opposing forces explained the mixture of good and evil, order and chaos, that humans experienced in daily life. This understanding came not as abstract theology, but as lived insight. Looking at the river before you, the parallel becomes clear. Water brings life, enables crops to grow, allows communities to flourish. Yet this same water in excess becomes flooding that destroys homes, drowns livestock, ruins carefully tended fields. Creation contains both creative and destructive potential, often in the same element, the same force. You imagine Zoroaster returning to his community after this experience, forever changed, yet outwardly the same. Did his eyes appear different to those who knew him well? Did his voice carry new authority? Or did the transformation remain invisible, a private revolution occurring within ordinary human form? The most significant changes often leave no external trace, at least initially. The difficulties would have begun immediately. How to translate ineffable experience into communicable concepts. How to convey certainty about the unseen to those who measure truth by physical evidence. How to challenge established religious practices without appearing to threaten the social order they helped maintain. You watch a fish leap from the water, catching an insect in mid-flight before disappearing again beneath the surface. The moment feels like a metaphor for revelation itself, a brief, spectacular connection between different realms, visible for an instant before returning to mystery. Those who haven't witnessed it might doubt the telling, might question whether anything unusual happened at all. Doubt surely followed Zoroaster's experience, not just from others, but from within. Moments of absolute clarity, alternated with periods of uncertainty. Was the vision real or delusion? Was the message universal or personal? Was he qualified to transform spiritual understanding for an entire people? Such questions would have haunted quiet moments, would have awakened him in darkness, would have tested his resolve. The sun reaches its zenith above you. Its heat intensifies, reflecting off the water in blinding flashes. Light becomes almost tangible, a presence rather than mere illumination. Fire and light would become central symbols in the religion Zoroaster, established, representations of truth, purity, and divine presence that could be understood even by those without direct mystical experience. A family approaches the river, children running ahead while parents call cautionary warnings. Their arrival breaks your contemplative solitude, reminding you that even sacred spaces remain part of common life. Revelation doesn't require separation from humanity, but rather deepens one's connection to it, revealing the profound significance of what might otherwise seem ordinary. The youngest child splashes into shallow water, laughing with delight at the sensation. This simple joy, connection between human and element, contains a seed of Zoroaster's understanding about the goodness of creation. Material existence wasn't something to escape, but to engage with properly, to respect, to help flourish according to divine intention. Righteousness meant right relationship with the physical world, not rejection of it. As the vision faded, the ordinary world remained, yet nothing would ever be the same. The river continued flowing, birds continued singing, clouds continued their slow passage across the sky. But these phenomena had acquired new meaning, new context. When understanding changes, reality itself seems transformed, though its outward appearance remains constant. Words hover in the air between us, invisible yet substantial. Before writing, fixed language into permanence. Human wisdom traveled through breath, through sound waves that disappeared the moment after their creation. The paradox of ancient sacred texts lies here, in their transformation from ephemeral speech to enduring record, from the living voice of a teacher to marks preserved on page or parchment. The Gathas, Zoroaster's 17 hymns that form the core of Zoroastrian scripture, began as spoken poetry. You can almost hear them now, carried on the desert wind that brushes your face. Rhythmic metered verses designed not primarily for writing but for memory, for transmission from mind to mind across generations. Their structure served as both aesthetic choice and practical necessity, beautiful patterns more easily remembered than prose. Imagine the first listeners, gathered perhaps in the growing darkness as evening fires cast long shadows. The prophet's voice rises and falls with practiced cadence. Some listeners furrow their brows in concentration, committing each syllable to memory. Others close their eyes, allowing the sounds to wash over them, trusting the words will find proper lodging in their consciousness. No one writes anything down. Writing exists in this period, but remains specialized knowledge, the domain of scribes, rather than religious practitioners. The Avesta, the larger collection of texts that will eventually include the Gathas, won't be committed to writing for centuries, possibly millennia, after Zoroaster's death. This vulnerability of sacred knowledge to human forgetting seems terrifying to modern sensibilities, yet it created a special relationship between text and community. You notice an older man teaching a young boy to recite a verse. The child stumbles over unfamiliar words, receives gentle correction, tries again. This scene has repeated countless times across centuries. The careful transmission of sacred language from one generation to the next. When a text lives primarily in human memory, its preservation becomes everyone's responsibility. The community itself becomes the living library. The language of the Gathas, Old Avestan, already sounds archaic even to those who first memorized it. Zoroaster deliberately chose elevated, formal speech to convey elevated, formal concepts. The strange texture of ancient religious language serves a purpose. It marks the boundary between ordinary communication and sacred transmission, between everyday speech and divine revelation. You listen closely, trying to catch fragments of meaning in the melodic recitation continuing nearby. The sounds themselves carry a kind of power, a musical quality independent of semantic meaning. This is how sacred language often functions, operating simultaneously as information and as incantation, as content and as ritual act. The saying itself matters as much as what is said. For centuries, these words existed only as sound waves, as patterns of breath shaped by human mouths and received by human ears. Their vulnerability seems astonishing. A single generation of neglect could have erased them completely, yet their survival depended on this very fragility. Because they could so easily be lost, they were guarded with extraordinary care. The oldest surviving physical manuscripts of the Avesta date only to the 13th century CE, though the tradition certainly existed in written form centuries earlier. Most ancient copies perished in Alexander's conquest of Persia, in the Arab invasion centuries later, in countless small disasters that claimed libraries and temples. The gap between Zoroaster's original utterance and the oldest surviving documentation spans thousands of years, a testament both to the text's importance and to human determination to preserve what matters most. You watch the old teacher and his young pupil continue their work of transmission. The boy has improved, now reciting with greater confidence. His face shows concentration rather than mere rote repetition. He begins to sense meaning behind the ancient syllables. This is how understanding passes between generations, not just as memorized content, but as awakened insight. The gathas themselves consist of 17 hymns, organized into 5 groups based on their poetic meters. Within these verses lie the core theological innovations of Zoroastrianism: monotheism centered on Ahura Mazda, cosmic dualism between good and evil forces, emphasis on individual moral choice, the promise of final judgment and renewal of creation, ideas that would eventually influence Judaism during the Babylonian exile, and through it, Christianity and Islam. What's remarkable about these texts is not just their antiquity, but their philosophical sophistication. They wrestle with questions that still occupy human thought: the origin of evil, the nature of free will, the relationship between divine justice and human suffering. They offer not simplistic answers, but a framework for understanding existence, as meaningful despite its evident imperfections. The language itself shapes the theology it conveys. Old Avestan lacks abstract terms for many concepts Western philosophy takes for granted. Instead, it personifies qualities. Truth becomes Asher, a divine entity rather than a concept. Good thought becomes Vohu Mana, a being rather than an idea. This linguistic feature creates a worldview where abstractions have personality, where values interact like characters in a cosmic drama. As the sun begins its descent, the recitation lesson concludes. Master and student bow slightly to each other, acknowledging the sacred trust that passes between them. You wonder how many similar scenes occurred across centuries, how many dedicated memorizers ensured these words survived conquest, migration, and cultural change. Each link in that human chain proved essential. One broken connection would have meant irretrievable loss. The gathas survive today because countless individuals deemed them worth remembering, worth protecting, worth sacrificing to preserve. The psychology of this commitment intrigues. What makes certain words valuable enough to memorize when forgetting would be easier? What convinces people across generations that particular ancient syllables must continue sounding in human mouths? You notice birds returning to their nests as evening approaches. Their instinctive behaviors, passed through genetic rather than cultural inheritance, provide a counterpoint to human transmission of knowledge. Birds build the same nests their ancestors built without being taught the specific techniques. Humans, require cultural mechanisms, deliberate teaching, structured memorization, eventually writing, to preserve their accumulated wisdom. The content of the Gathas reflects this human need for continuity amid change. They speak of cosmic history with a beginning, middle, and end, a narrative structure that imposes meaning on time itself. They promise that righteous choices matter beyond individual lifespans, that moral actions contribute to an eventual triumph of good over evil. This framework provides purpose for transmission itself. Preserving wisdom becomes part of the cosmic struggle between order and chaos. As darkness grows deeper, fires are lit in the settlement. Their flickering light creates moving shadows, a visual reminder of the dualism that pervades Zoroastrian thought. These ancient syllables still vibrate in the air, though the tongues that first formed them have long turned to dust. But their resonance continues, echoing through religious traditions that developed later, influencing human understanding in ways both recognized and forgotten. Night fully embraces the landscape now. Stars emerge with the profound clarity only, possible far from modern light pollution. Their cold fire punctuates the darkness with ancient light, photons that began their journey toward Earth when Zoroaster still walked these lands. The night sky he witnessed remains largely unchanged, a rare continuity across millennia of human transformation. This vast celestial canvas served as backdrop for Zoroaster's most revolutionary insight. His understanding of existence as fundamentally, morale, as a battlefield between opposing forces of creation and destruction. The stars themselves became players in this cosmic drama, heavenly bodies aligned with divine order against the chaotic void between them. You sit beside a small fire, its warmth creating a bubble of comfort against the night's increasing chill. The flames dance with unpredictable movement yet follow predictable patterns, another natural metaphor for Zoroaster's dualistic worldview. Fire both creates and destroys, illuminates and consumes, protects and threatens. Its dual nature makes it the perfect physical representation of existence balanced between opposing forces. Ahura Mazda. The name emerges from memory with almost physical presence. The wise Lord, ultimate source of all positive creation, perfect in wisdom and goodness, not merely the strongest deity among many, as in surrounding polytheistic cultures, but uniquely transcendent, uncreated, eternal. This theological innovation marked Zoroastrianism as perhaps the world's first monotheistic religion, though with important qualifications. Across from this divine perfection stands Angra Mainyu, the destructive spirit, source of death, disease, and falsehood. Not merely a troublesome deity within a divine pantheon, but a fundamental cosmic principle of negativity, of anti-creation, not created by Ahura Mazda, yet eternally opposed to the divine plan for flourishing existence. The fire crackles suddenly, sending sparks spiraling upward toward distant stars. You watch their brief, brilliant trajectories before they disappear into darkness. These momentary lights between earth and heaven seem to illustrate the human condition as Zoroaster understood it. Brief lives capable of brilliance, suspended between material and spiritual realms, ultimately choosing alignment with creation or destruction. This cosmic framework solved philosophical problems that plagued other religious systems. If a single, all-powerful God exists, how does one explain the existence of evil? Zoroaster's answer: evil emerges not from the divine, but from an opposing principle that has always existed. The world's imperfections reflect not divine limitation, but ongoing conflict between opposing forces, a battle not yet concluded. This understanding provided both explanation and purpose. Suffering no longer appeared as divine punishment or arbitrary fate, but as evidence of destructive forces temporarily ascendant in particular situations. More importantly, human choices mattered cosmically. Each decision aligned the individual with either creation or destruction, contributing incrementally to the ultimate outcome of the struggle. A night bird calls from somewhere in the darkness, its voice plaintive yet somehow comforting. Other creatures continue their activities despite human sleep. A reminder that the cosmic drama involves all living beings, not just human participants. In Zoroastrian thought, animals too have moral standing, deserving protection as part of Ahura Mazda's good creation, not merely as resources for human use. The innovative nature of this cosmic vision cannot be overstated. In surrounding cultures, gods frequently acted from jealousy, lust, anger, displaying human failings on a larger scale. Zoroaster conceptualized divinity differently, as perfect goodness and wisdom without contradiction or moral ambiguity. Evil existed not within the divine nature, but as a separate principle entirely opposed to it. You add small branches to the fire, watching how quickly they're consumed. The hungry flames transform solid matter into light, heat, and ultimately, ash. Physical analogies for spiritual concepts not easily visualized. Abstract theological propositions become more accessible when connected to tangible experience, to the elements encountered in daily life. The genius of Zoroaster's teaching lay partially in this connection between cosmic truth and ordinary experience. The great battle between good and evil manifested not just in mythological events, but in agricultural success or failure, in bodily health or illness, in truthful speech or deception. The universal became particular, the metaphysical became physical, the theological became practical. Night deepens around you. The settlement sleeps except for a few night guardians tending communal fires. These sentinels against darkness performed practical functions, protecting against predators, maintaining warmth, preserving the valuable resource of flame overnight. Yet they simultaneously enacted religious symbolism, human cooperation with divine forces of light against encroaching darkness, of order against chaos. This intertwining of practical action and cosmic meaning characterized Zoroastrian ethics. Good actions weren't simply those that brought divine favor or avoided punishment, but those that actively participated in Ahura Mazda's creative purposes. Tending crops, raising healthy animals, speaking truth, maintaining bodily purity. These ordinary activities became frontline engagements in the cosmic struggle. The stars continue their slow progression across the night sky, each following ancient patterns established at creation. Their orderly movement contrasts with the unpredictability of human affairs, the constant disruptions caused by Angra Mainyu's influence in the material world. Yet this visible cosmic order provided reassurance that disorder wasn't ultimate, that the universe fundamentally aligned with divine intention despite temporary victories of destructive forces. You notice how different the night feels when understood through Zoroastrian cosmology. Darkness isn't merely absence of light, but an active force to be resisted. Each fire becomes not just a tool, but a sacred ally. Each star, not just a distant sun, but evidence of light's ultimate dominance over void. Perspective transforms experience, without changing any physical reality. The power of religious framework to reinterpret the world. The cosmic battle had a beginning, middle, and resolution in Zoroastrian understanding. Creation began with Ahura Mazda's free choice to manifest existence. The current phase, mixture of good and evil, represented the middle period of struggle. The end would bring definitive separation, with destructive forces finally defeated and creation restored to its intended perfection. This temporal framework gave history direction and purpose rather than endless cyclical repetition. A cold wind brushes against your face, carrying scents of sage and distant mountains. Even this sensory experience takes on meaning within Zoroaster's system. Wind as one of the sacred elements, mountains as buttresses against chaos. The entire natural world becomes legible as a text, its features telling stories of divine creativity and destructive counteraction. This meaningful reading of nature distinguished Zoroastrianism from both primitive animism and later nature-rejecting philosophies. The The material world wasn't filled with competing spirit beings requiring propitiation, nor was it a fallen realm to be escaped. Rather, nature was Ahura Mazda's good creation, temporarily corrupted but fundamentally valuable, deserving human care and protection as religious obligation. Your fire burns lower, requiring attention to maintain its light and warmth. This necessity parallels the central Zoroastrian insight about moral effort. Good doesn't automatically triumph, but requires vigilant participation. Light doesn't passively overcome darkness. It must be actively maintained, just as truth doesn't naturally prevail over falsehood without human commitment to speak and live it. The comfort and burden of cosmic meaning rests in this human responsibility. Comfort in knowing one's smallest choices matter ultimately. Burden in recognizing one cannot opt out of significance. No neutral ground exists in this worldview. Each action either supports creation or aids destruction, builds or damages, aligns with truth or with falsehood. Far across the sleeping settlement, a child cries out from nightmare before being soothed, back to sleep by attentive parents. Even this small drama reflects the larger cosmic narrative, the intrusion of fear and suffering, the countervailing forces of comfort and protection. Family relationships themselves become microcosms of divine care, human love reflecting divine benevolence. The starkness of Zoroaster's dualism provided clarity in a confusing world. When natural disasters struck, when illness claimed loved ones, when enemies attacked without provocation, these weren't divine punishments requiring self-blame, but manifestations of destructive forces to be recognized and resisted. Suffering maintained its tragedy without becoming meaningless, its pain acknowledged without becoming punishment. Pre-dawn light begins to soften the eastern horizon. Night's dominance, seemingly permanent during darkest hours, reveals itself as temporary, with the first hints of returning day. This daily victory of light over darkness served as natural metaphor for Zoroaster's eschatological hope, the promise that Ahura Mazda's creative purposes would ultimately prevail, despite appearances to the contrary. This confidence in final resolution distinguished Zoroastrianism from fatalistic or cyclical worldviews of surrounding cultures. History had direction. Moral choices accumulated consequence. Time itself moved toward culmination rather than endless repetition. This linear understanding would later influence Judaism during the Babylonian exile, and through it, Christianity and Islam, a conceptual revolution whose effects continue shaping human understanding of time and purpose. And perhaps, as you drift towards sleep, you recognize this ancient battle still wages, in nations, in hearts, in the quiet moments before dreams come, the wisdom of seeing beyond superficial events to the moral principles they embody. The comfort of framing suffering not as meaningless chaos, but as temporary resistance to be overcome. The responsibility of recognizing how ordinary choices align with cosmic purposes larger than individual lives. Morning arrives fully now, the sun climbing above eastern mountains with golden intensity. Its light transforms the landscape, revealing colors hidden during night hours, casting shadows that define shape and distance, warming surfaces still cool from darkness. This solar presence, so fundamental to life yet so easily taken for granted, held special significance in Zoroastrian understanding, representing divine wisdom made visible in physical form. Yet Ahura Mazda's presence manifested not just through celestial bodies, but through 6 divine attributes, or emanations, the Amesha Spentas, often translated as bounteous immortals. These weren't separate deities in a polytheistic pantheon, but aspects of divine nature expressed as distinct entities, bridges between absolute transcendence and human comprehension. The first of these, Vohu Mana, good mind or good purpose, approaches you as more feeling than form, an internal clarity, that aligns thought with divine intention. This presence manifests as sudden insight without cognitive struggle, as moral certainty without hesitation. Not merely intellectual understanding, but wisdom integrated with purpose, knowing inseparable from doing. You watch a farmer carefully, directing irrigation water through channels to nurturing crops. His practical knowledge, accumulated through generations of agricultural experience, exemplifies vohu mana in human expression. Intelligence applied to creative purpose, understanding translated into nurturing action, thought serving life rather than abstract speculation. The second divine spark, Asha Vahishta, truth, righteousness, radiates through the settlement as people begin daily activities. A woman sweeps her doorway clean, maintaining order against entropy's constant intrusion. A merchant measures grain with careful precision, ensuring fair exchange. A judge listens impartially to disputing neighbors. Each action, however mundane, participates in cosmic order, aligns human behavior with underlying truth. Asha encompasses both factual accuracy and moral righteousness, both natural order and ethical behavior. In Zoroastrian thought, these aspects remain inseparable. Speaking truth about the world corresponds to living truthfully within it. Lying disrupts cosmic harmony as severely as physical violence, perhaps more so for being less visible in its effects. The third emanation, Kshathra Vairya, desirable dominion power, appears in the careful authority of an elder directing communal labor. His leadership serves community welfare rather than personal aggrandizement. His commands reflect reasoned judgment rather than arbitrary will. This divine attribute transforms raw power into just governance, strength into protection, authority into service. In a world where might typically claimed right as its justification, this understanding of legitimate power as necessarily serving good purpose represented radical innovation. Political authority carried spiritual obligation, its legitimacy dependent on alignment with divine creative intention, rather than mere force or traditional precedent. The fourth divine quality, Spenta Armaiti, holy devotion, earth, lives in the reverent care with which a woman tends her garden, her hands working soil with both practical knowledge and obvious affection, not merely extracting resources, but participating in creation's ongoing flourishing. This divine spark connects intellectual understanding to emotional commitment, transforms belief into devotion, knowledge into love. Armaiti's association with earth revealed a theological insight often missed in later religious systems, that devotion requires groundedness, that spirituality disconnected from material reality becomes abstraction without transformative power. The physical world provides both testing ground and expression for spiritual truth, rather than distraction from it. The fifth emanation, Harvatat, wholeness or water, flows through the community as physical and social health. Children play with obvious vitality, elders move with dignity. Despite age's limitations, social interactions proceed with mutual respect rather than dominant struggles. This divine quality manifests as integration of parts into harmonious whole, as flourishing that encompasses rather than sacrifices individual elements. You pause near the village well, watching people gather to collect water while exchanging news and greetings. This social center embodies Harvatat's dual nature, providing physical hydration necessary for bodily health, while simultaneously nurturing community cohesion through regular interaction. Individual and collective wellness intertwine, reflecting divine intention for creation's comprehensive flourishing. The sixth divine spark, Ameritat, immortality plants, surrounds you in the settlement's careful cultivation of plant life. Fruit, trees arranged to maximize sunlight, herbs growing in protected gardens, grain fields stretching toward the horizon. This divine quality transcends mere extension of existence to encompass ongoing participation in life's self-renewal. the continuity that persists through individual mortality. An old woman teaches her granddaughter to collect specific healing herbs, showing which parts to harvest, which to leave for regrowth. This knowledge transmission itself embodies a meritat, information surviving beyond individual lifespans, wisdom accumulating across generations. Immortality exists not just as future hope, but as present participation in what endures. Together, these 6 divine emanations create a conceptual framework that bridges abstract theology and lived experience. The transcendent becomes accessible without losing its essential nature. Divine attributes gain personality without fragmenting into competing deities. Human actions acquire cosmic significance without requiring supernatural intervention for validation. You notice how thoroughly integrated these theological concepts remain with natural elements. Earth, water, plants, fire, often associated with Asher's purifying truth. Unlike later religious systems that sometimes position spirituality against materiality, Zoroaster's vision embedded divine reality within physical existence while simultaneously transcending it. The sacred manifested through the ordinary rather than despite it. A group gathers around a small fire for morning prayers. Their murmured words carry rhythmic cadence. Their gestures display practiced reverence. This regular ritual participation aligns human consciousness with divine attributes, reorients attention toward cosmic struggle and individual responsibility within it. Daily practice reinforces theological understanding, embeds abstract concepts in bodily memory. The prayers include ethical self-examination, have thoughts, words, and deeds aligned with Asher's truth since previous reflection, have interactions with others expressed Vohumana's good purpose or served selfish ends, have resources been used according to Kshatra's proper dominion or exploited without consideration of consequences. This moral inventory transforms theological abstractions into practical guidance. As the day progresses toward noon, you observe how these divine qualities interweave through ordinary activities. A mother comforting her child embodies both Armaiti's devoted care and Vohumana's wise guidance. Farmers working cooperatively to repair irrigation channels demonstrate both Kshatra's proper organization of effort and Hauvatat's contribution to communal well-being. A healer preparing plant medicines expresses both Amaratat's knowledge of life's renewal and Asher's accurate understanding of natural properties. The genius of this theological framework lies in its comprehensive integration. Cosmic principles find expression through everyday actions. Natural elements embody spiritual qualities. Human relationships reflect divine attributes. Unlike systems that locate divine reality exclusively beyond ordinary experience, Zoroastrianism recognized divine presence permeating creation while maintaining transcendent identity. Light shifts as the sun reaches zenith position. Shadows shrink to their smallest extent, pulling back beneath the objects that cast them like truth briefly triumphant over obscurity. This daily moment of maximum illumination serves as natural metaphor for Zoroastrian eschatological hope. The promised time when Ahura Mazda's creative light fully reveals reality without distortion, when divine qualities achieve complete expression, without counteraction. These 6 flames dance around the central fire, as thoughts dance around the edge of consciousness, as you slowly sink deeper into understanding of how abstract theology becomes lived reality through conceptual bridges between transcendence and immanence, between cosmic principles and human experience, between divine nature and natural processes. Each quality invites participation rather than mere acknowledgement, engagement rather than mere belief. The afternoon brings intensifying heat, sunlight reflecting blindingly off stone surfaces throughout the settlement. This ordinary phenomenon, light's interaction with matter, holds extraordinary significance in Zoroastrian understanding. Fire and water, seemingly opposed elements, together form the primary symbols of purification and divine presence in this ancient faith. Fire first. Not the destructive inferno that consumes indiscriminately, but controlled flame, the hearth fire that transforms raw food into nourishment, the torch that pushes back darkness, the carefully tended sacred fire that represents wisdom's illumination. You approach one such fire temple at the settlement's edge, its modest structure belying its spiritual importance. Outside, worshippers remove footwear before entering, a ritual acknowledgement that they approach sacred space. Some perform ablutions with water from a nearby spring, physical cleansing symbolizing spiritual preparation. Their movements display practiced familiarity, yet maintain mindful attention, routine without becoming mechanical, tradition enlivened by present intention. The temple interior holds surprising simplicity. No elaborate decorations or imposing idols, just a central fire burning in a metal vessel, attended by priests who ensure its continuous burning. The fire itself becomes focus of devotion, not as deity but as purest symbol of divine presence, as physical approximation of metaphysical reality. Light without material form, transformation without destruction, energy made visible. The priests wear white clothing and cover their mouths with cloth while tending the fire. These precautions serve practical purpose, preventing contamination of sacred flame by human breath or unclean matter. Yet they simultaneously embody theological understanding, recognition of human limitations when approaching divine presence, acknowledgement of the boundary between creator and created even amid intimate connection. Watching the fire, you notice its constant subtle movement, its simultaneously predictable and unpredictable nature. Flame follows physical laws, yet never repeats exact patterns, demonstrating order and spontaneity simultaneously existing. This visual paradox illustrates Zoroastrian understanding of divine relationship to creation, establishing fundamental structures while permitting variation, setting boundaries while allowing freedom. The sound of fire provides auditory symmetry to its visual qualities, constant yet ever-changing, rhythmic yet irregular. Practitioners often meditate on these natural contradictions, finding in them metaphors for understanding divine nature that transcends simple categorization. Abstract theological concepts become accessible through sensory experience, intellectual understanding supported by physical perception. A priest adds small pieces of sandalwood to the flame, releasing aromatic smoke that fills the temple with sweet fragrance. This offering engages multiple senses simultaneously. Visual brightness intensifies, auditory crackling increases, olfactory pleasure expands. Divine worship becomes fully embodied experience, engaging the complete person rather than merely abstract intellect or emotion. This multisensory approach characterizes Zoroastrian ritual generally, physical actions carrying spiritual significance, material elements expressing metaphysical principles. Unlike traditions that might view physical world as distraction from spiritual reality, this ancient faith consistently affirms creation's goodness while acknowledging its temporary corruption. The material serves as medium for divine connection, rather than obstacle to it. Outside the temple, water flows from natural springs into collection pools. This second sacred element embodies different but complementary qualities: adaptability rather than transformation, nourishment rather than illumination, gentle persistence rather than energetic consumption. Together, fire and water represent divine nature's complementary aspects: active and receptive, initiating and sustaining, transcendent and immanent. You watch people approach the water with visible reverence, some collecting it for home use, in clay vessels, others performing ritual washing before prayer. Their careful attention to prevent contamination reflects theological understanding of pollution as both physical and spiritual concern. Maintaining purity serves both practical health and religious obligation. another integration of material and spiritual considerations. Water's natural properties make it an effective symbol for spiritual concepts. It cleanses without being diminished, nourishes all life without discrimination, finds paths of least resistance, while eventually overcoming seemingly immovable obstacles. These observable characteristics translate complex theology into accessible images, allowing abstract principles to be grasped through everyday experience. A group of women wash clothing in a designated area downstream from drinking water collection. Their practical activity follows religious principles, maintaining proper separation between clean and potentially polluted, ensuring resources remain available for future use, accepting personal inconvenience for communal benefit. Ordinary labor becomes spiritual practice when aligned with cosmic understanding. The paradoxical relationship between fire and water, elements that can destroy each other, yet both essential for life, provides powerful metaphor for understanding creative tension within existence. Opposition need not mean conflict when properly balanced within larger purpose. Different properties serve complementary functions within integrated system. Unity encompasses diversity rather than eliminating it. Mid-afternoon light bathes the landscape in amber glow. You notice how differently surfaces reflect this illumination. Water captures and returns light. Stone absorbs and transforms it to heat. Plants utilize it for growth. This variety of responses to same input illustrates another Zoroastrian principle. Different beings serve divine purpose according to their specific natures rather than through enforced uniformity. The sensory experience of watching sacred flames produces subtle psychological effects. Attention naturally focuses on fire's movement, reducing mental chatter. Breathing often synchronizes with flame's rhythm, inducing calmer physiological state. Visual focus on central point facilitates meditative awareness. These natural responses make fire particularly effective as devotional focal point, its physical properties supporting spiritual practice. A priest explains to gathered listeners how maintaining sacred fire requires constant vigilance. The flame must never go out through neglect, must never receive improper offerings or contaminated fuel, must be treated with consistent reverence rather than casual familiarity. This care for physical flame simultaneously trains moral attention, vigilance against ethical contamination, commitment to maintaining internal light of wisdom, responsibility for nurturing rather than consuming spiritual gifts. You observe how contradictory human responses to fire, attraction and caution, comfort and fear, mirror the psychological complexity of encountering divine presence. The sacred simultaneously invites approach and inspires awe, offers warmth and maintains untouchable intensity. This emotional paradox finds appropriate expression through fire symbolism, allowing worshippers to engage with complexity through tangible experience. The priest continues explanation by demonstrating how different materials produce different qualities of flame. Some burn with steady consistency, others with dramatic intensity but brief duration. These variations provide metaphors for human character and spiritual development. Steady commitment, producing sustained illumination, preferred over momentary brightness, followed by darkness. Consistent warmth, valued above spectacular but temporary heat. Across the settlement, water flows through irrigation channels with precisely controlled direction and volume. This management of life-giving resource represents cooperation between human technical knowledge and natural processes, another integration of material skill with spiritual understanding. Proper stewardship of water acknowledges both its sacred nature and its practical necessity, refuses to separate utility from reverence. Late afternoon brings cooling breezes, shifting the sensory experience of both fire and water. Flames dance more actively in moving air. Water surfaces ripple with patterns caused by unseen forces. These visible responses to invisible influence create natural metaphor for spiritual engagement. Divine presence perceived not directly but through its effects on receptive elements, through patterns created in responsive substance. The rituals involving these elements and their emotional impact cannot be reduced to simple intellectual propositions. Their power lives partly in experiential dimension, the felt sense of purification after water ritual, the intuitive recognition of wisdom's illumination while gazing at sacred flame. Theology becomes embodied knowledge rather than merely conceptual. Assent, truth recognized through multiple dimensions of human experience. The flame flickers between being and non-being, just as you hover now between wakefulness and dreams of ancient practice, of elements elevated to sacred status without being, mistaken for deities themselves, of material substances recognized as most appropriate symbols for immaterial reality. This delicate theological balance, affirming physical world's spiritual significance without reducing divine reality to physical processes, distinguishes Zoroaster's vision from both materialistic reduction and spiritualistic rejection of creation's goodness. Shadows lengthen as afternoon moves toward evening. The day's certainties begin dissolving into twilight ambiguities, a fitting backdrop for contemplating Zoroaster's years of rejection and wandering. After receiving divine revelation, the prophet returned to his community not as celebrated visionary, but as troubling dissident, his message meeting resistance rather than welcome. You move to the settlement's edge, where land opens into wilderness. This boundary between human order and natural unpredictability evokes the prophet's position after revelatory experience, belonging neither entirely to conventional society nor fully separate from it, straddling known and unknown territories. The loneliness of this liminal space pervades historical accounts of Zoroaster's early ministry. According to tradition, he spent 10 years wandering, rejected by those who should have been most receptive. 10 years of carrying transformative truth without finding willing recipients. 10 years of questioning whether divine communication had been misunderstood, or whether human intransigence would forever prevent its acceptance. The emotional weight of such prolonged rejection can only be imagined. The landscape before you features a narrow path winding through increasingly rugged terrain. Following this route requires constant attention, continual adaptation to changing conditions. Not unlike Zoroaster's journey, proceeding without clear external validation, adapting message to different audiences while maintaining its essential integrity, persisting despite discouragement and opposition. Traditional accounts describe the prophet approaching first his own cousin, then various religious authorities and tribal leaders. Each rejection would have carried distinctive pain: family dismissal threatening core identity, religious rejection questioning spiritual authenticity, political refusal denying social legitimacy. These compound wounds tested conviction when evidence of divine favor seemed entirely absent. You pause beside a weathered stone that might have served as temporary seat for countless travelers. Its surface bears shallow depressions where countless hands have rested, a physical record of shared human experience across time. How many others have paused here in various stages of personal journey, hopeful beginning, discouraged middle, triumphant return, final passage? The stone records all equally, preserving no distinction between momentous and mundane travels. Opposition to Zoroaster's message came from established priesthood with predictable intensity. His monotheistic vision threatened polytheistic system that supported their authority and livelihood. His emphasis on individual moral choice undermined their role as mediators between humanity and capricious deities. His ethical focus challenged ritual formalism that required their specialized knowledge. Innovation always threatens established systems, regardless of comparative validity. The specific arguments leveled against him have vanished from historical record, but their general nature can be inferred from similar religious conflicts. Accusations of arrogance in claiming direct divine revelation, charges of disrespect toward ancestral traditions, warnings about social disruption that follows theological innovation. The vocabulary changes across cultures and centuries, but resistance to transformative ideas follows predictable patterns. You continue along the path as evening birds begin their twilight chorus. Their calls, some melodious, others harsh, fill the air with overlapping communication, each species expressing distinctive identity through sound. This natural concert offers metaphor for human ideological pluralism, the competitive claims of various traditions, each seeking dominance within limited social space. Zoroaster's wandering years weren't merely geographical, but intellectual and emotional journey. Initial certainty tested by sustained opposition. Divine clarity clouded by human doubt. Absolute conviction tempered by practical obstacles. The transformative passage from individual insight to communicable message, from personal experience to shared tradition. Vision maintained through darkness of rejection requires greater strength than receiving illumination itself. A small herd of goats passes nearby, returning to settlement after day, grazing wild vegetation. Their relationship with human keepers exemplifies the complex interdependence that characterizes successful adaptation. Neither fully wild nor completely domesticated, maintaining independence within structured relationship, perhaps analogous to Prophet's position. Neither entirely separate from society nor fully integrated within it, maintaining distinct identity while seeking connection. The sensory experience of exile and isolation features prominently in mystical traditions across cultures. Desert wilderness, mountain solitude, forest depths, places where conventional certainties fade, where sensory deprivation opens different modes of perception, where survival requires attentiveness to subtle signs, easily missed in social environments. Rejection forced Zoroaster into similar liminal space between human and divine realms, between old understanding and new revelation. You notice small desert flowers blooming despite harsh conditions, delicate purple blossoms emerging from seemingly barren soil, thriving where more robust plants fail. Their unlikely flourishing suggests metaphorical parallel to spiritual innovation. New truth often emerges not from centers of established prosperity, but from margins where necessity demands creative adaptation, where conventional wisdom proves insufficient for survival. The emotional weight of being misunderstood differs from simple disagreement. To be heard incorrectly, to have one's deepest insights dismissed as delusion or deception, to recognize truth's importance while failing, to communicate it effectively. These experiences strike at existential core. They challenge not just ideas, but identity itself, the fundamental sense of purpose that gives meaning to struggle. As light continues fading, you imagine Zoroaster making camp during his wandering years, gathering sparse firewood, seeking water in arid landscape, preparing simple meal, creating temporary shelter against night's cold and predators' threat. These mundane necessities continued regardless of spiritual mission. Divine messenger remains subject to physical needs, to creation's laws, to body's limitations despite mind's expansion. The gradual gathering of followers despite opposition followed pattern common to many spiritual innovations. Not mass conversion, but individual recognition, person by person, small group by small group. Truth finding resonance first in those already questioning existing systems, already sensing inconsistencies in conventional explanations, already seeking what they hadn't yet found in established traditions. A figure appears on the path ahead, a solitary traveler moving in opposite direction. As distance between you closes, details emerge. Weathered face suggesting hard experience, eyes holding both weariness and purpose, posture communicating determination despite visible fatigue. Without exchanging words, you recognize kinship in journey. Brief nod acknowledges shared human experience transcending specific circumstances. History rarely preserves names of first disciples, those who recognized new truth while still unvalidated by institutional acceptance or popular acclaim. Their courage deserves special acknowledgement. risking social standing, family relationships, economic security to follow insight not yet proven viable. Those initial responses provided crucial confirmation when external evidence remained absent, human connection sustaining vision through isolation's darkest periods. Twilight deepens toward night. Stars appear first as faint suggestions rather than definite presences, gradually gaining clarity as darkness intensifies. Their emergence parallels the slow validation of Zoroaster's message. Initial glimpses recognized by few, gradual clarification through persistent presence, eventual illumination impossible to dismiss except through deliberate blindness. The prophet's wandering covered both geographical and social territories, from settled communities to nomadic encampments, from agricultural settlements to trading outposts, from centers of existing religious practice to peripheral regions where tradition held looser grip. Each context required translation of central message into relevant vocabulary, application of universal principles to particular circumstances, adaptation without compromise. You find suitable location for overnight rest, sheltered from wind by rock formation that has offered similar protection to travelers across centuries. The continuity of human needs across time creates connection with those who previously occupied this space. Though separated by years or millennia, you share experience of seeking safety, of requiring rest, of finding momentary home in inhospitable environment. In rejection, he found purpose, in wandering, direction. A paradox familiar to anyone who has ever lain awake, questioning their path through darkness, both literal and metaphorical. Certainty sometimes emerges most clearly when external validation disappears entirely, leaving only internal compass guided by deeper principles than social approval. The wilderness that threatens survival simultaneously offers clarity impossible within comfortable conformity. Morning arrives with renewed brightness, the landscape transformed once again from mysterious shadow realm to defined geography. Your journey continues toward more populated regions, where Zoroaster eventually found the receptive audience that would transform personal revelation into established tradition. The path descends gradually from rugged highlands toward more fertile valleys, where larger settlements support more complex social structures. According to traditional accounts, Zoroaster's pivotal breakthrough came through royal patronage, specifically the conversion of King Vishtaspa of Bactria. This historical figure remains as enigmatic as the prophet himself, with scholars debating his exact identity and reign. Yet the pattern his conversion established, religious innovation gaining legitimacy through political support, would repeat throughout subsequent history. You approach a settlement significantly larger than previous ones encountered. Its organization suggests more developed political structure, buildings arranged with greater intentionality, defenses constructed with strategic planning, social hierarchy evident in architectural variation. Power concentrates here in ways absent from smaller communities, creating both opportunities and obstacles for new ideas seeking acceptance. The royal court represented simultaneously the greatest challenge and the greatest opportunity for Zoroaster's message. Court priests maintained established religious practices integrated with political authority, their position dependent on traditional beliefs. Yet rulers often displayed greater intellectual flexibility than general population, their broader perspective sometimes allowing recognition of limitations in conventional wisdom. You observe the settlement's central structure, a building larger and more elaborately constructed than surrounding dwellings. Not palace by later standards, but clearly seat of local authority, its placement and design communicating political significance. Guards maintain vigilant presence at entrance, controlling access according to established hierarchy. Power maintains boundaries around itself, determining who may approach and under what conditions. Gaining audience with King Vishtaspa required either extraordinary persistence or favorable introduction. Traditions vary regarding which path opened this crucial door. Some accounts describe the prophet healing the king's favorite horse after court physicians failed, demonstrating practical power alongside spiritual insight. Others suggest a court official already sympathetic to Zoroaster's teaching arranged initial meeting, personal connection, facilitating institutional access. The debate with court priests and scholars forms central drama in traditional narratives of this encounter. Imagine the scene. Weathered prophet facing established authorities within their domain of power, challenging fundamental assumptions supporting their position, proposing radical alternatives to familiar practices. The intellectual courage required for such confrontation matches the emotional fortitude developed through years of rejection. You approach the settlement gate, where guards assess travelers entering their jurisdiction. Their scrutiny evaluates potential threat or benefit to community they protect. Practical security concerns, underlying symbolic boundary between insider and outsider. Zoroaster faced similar evaluation, his ideas examined for potential disruption or contribution to existing order. Innovation always encounters this threshold question. Does new thought threaten necessary stability or correct dysfunctional stagnation? Inside the settlement, activity levels increase compared to smaller communities previously encountered. Specialized crafts occupy dedicated spaces, metalworking, pottery, textile production, their practitioners displaying skills developed through generational knowledge transfer. Social complexity creates interdependence, requiring more sophisticated coordination, relationships extending beyond direct personal connection to include institutional mediation. According to tradition, Vishtaspa requested 3 days for private consideration before publicly accepting Zoroaster's teaching. This thoughtful evaluation, rather than impulsive response, characterizes wise leadership, recognizing decisions' significance beyond personal preference, weighing implications for community stability alongside truth claims, considering responsibility to both inheritance and innovation. The king's conversion after witnessing miracles or being convinced by wisdom. Accounts vary regarding specific mechanism. Represented crucial validation for message previously rejected. Royal acceptance provided not just personal endorsement but institutional legitimacy, transforming peripheral idea into centered influence. The relationship between spiritual truth and political power remains complex, each potentially corrupting or authenticating the other depending on specific interaction. You observe social hierarchies evident throughout the settlement, clothing, indicating status differences, spatial arrangements reflecting influence relationships, interaction patterns, demonstrating established authority structures. Into this ordered system, Zoroaster introduced radically egalitarian spiritual framework, individual moral responsibility, transcending social position, divine judgment, evaluating internal integrity rather than external compliance, truth claim, standing independent of human authorization. How royal patronage transformed a fringe belief into a state religion follows pattern repeated throughout religious history. Official acceptance provides practical resources, physical spaces for gathering, financial support for leadership development, legal protection against opposition, educational opportunities for teaching new generations. External support creates conditions where internal development can proceed without constant existential threat. The tensions inherent in this transformation raise essential questions about religious authenticity. Does institutional establishment necessarily compromise spiritual purity? Can radical truth survive incorporation into existing power structures? Does widespread acceptance inevitably dilute original insight? Zoroastrianism navigated these challenges more successfully than many traditions, maintaining ethical integrity while gaining social influence. You notice artists at work within the settlement, musicians practicing complex compositions, painters decorating ceramic vessels, storytellers gathering audiences for traditional narratives. Cultural expression flourishes where material security provides foundation for activities beyond immediate survival. Royal patronage similarly allowed Zoroastrian tradition to develop artistic dimensions, articulating abstract theology through concrete symbolism, philosophical implications through ritual enactment. The sensory details of the royal court contrasted sharply with Zoroaster's simple origins, elaborate clothing versus functional attire, refined cuisine versus basic sustenance, cultivated mannerisms versus direct communication. This environmental shift required translating spiritual insight between radically different contexts while maintaining essential meaning, adapting expression without compromising substance. Tradition describes Vishtaspa establishing fire temples throughout his territory following conversion, institutionalizing practices that previously existed primarily through individual adherence. This transition from personal conviction to social structure characterizes mature religious development, moving from prophets' direct experience to communities' shared practice, from revolutionary insight to evolutionary tradition, from charismatic moment to sustainable movement. You pass through settlement marketplace where diverse goods exchange through complex value calculations, different objects considered equivalent according to agreed standards, specialized labor traded for materials, unavailable locally, accumulated wealth converted to immediate necessity. This economic system parallels developing religious structure, abstract principles converted to concrete practices, specialized knowledge exchanged through established channels, spiritual capital translated into institutional influence. The delicate balance between royal support and religious independence established pattern Zoroastrianism would navigate throughout subsequent history. Political protection provided essential security for community development. Religious principles offered ethical framework for governance evaluation, neither completely separate nor fully integrated. The relationship maintained creative tension between different sources of authority. Approaching settlement center, you observe public ritual underway. Community leaders performing ceremonial functions before gathered citizens. Shared participation, creating collective identity through synchronized activity. Similar social dynamics would eventually characterize Zoroastrian community practices. Individual spiritual commitment, finding expression through communal embodiment. Personal insight validated through shared recognition. The transition from prophets, direct authority to institutional continuity represents crucial evolution in any spiritual tradition. Charismatic leadership provides initial energy, but remains vulnerable to founders' limitations and mortality. Institutional structure sacrifices some immediacy but enables transgenerational preservation. Zoroaster's teachings required both personal inspiration and social organization to fulfill their transformative potential. As afternoon light begins softening toward evening, you reflect on how pivotal moments often appear ordinary when directly experienced. Vishtaspa's decision, transforming religious history through royal endorsement, occurred within ordinary human consciousness, influenced by personal concerns alongside philosophical evaluation. Momentous historical developments emerge from specific individuals making particular choices in concrete circumstances, their full significance apparent only retrospectively. Power embraced wisdom, and wisdom gained power, an alliance as delicate as your consciousness right now, hovering between engagement with historical patterns and recognition of their continuing relevance. The relationship between spiritual insight and practical application, between transcendent truth and social embodiment, between divine revelation and human institution, continues shaping religious experience across traditions and centuries. You find yourself in the quiet rhythm of a Zoroastrian household as dawn breaks over the ancient Persian landscape. The family rises before the sun, their first act turning toward the east with arms raised in devotion. In this gesture, you witness a microcosm of their entire belief system, a daily recommitment to light over darkness, to order over chaos. The head of the household kneels before a small flame kept in an alcove, feeding it carefully selected pieces of dry, fragrant wood. No breath is allowed to touch the sacred fire directly. The mouth is covered with a small cloth, the paddan, preserving the flame's purity from even the microscopic impurities of human breath. You notice how this practice embodies the physical manifestation of good thoughts, good words, good deeds, the mantra that shapes every aspect of Zoroastrian life. In the fields surrounding the modest dwellings, farmers work not merely to sustain themselves, but as participants in the cosmic struggle. Each seed planted is an act of creation aligned with Ahura Mazda. Each weed pulled represents the constant battle against Angra Mainyu's destructive influence. Nothing is mundane in this worldview. The most ordinary tasks carry cosmic significance. Women move through the household with quiet authority. Unlike many contemporary civilizations, Zoroastrian tradition afforded women considerable respect. Marriage is a sacred covenant, divorce permitted, but discouraged, and women maintain property rights that would seem progressive even by later standards. You observe children being taught not through rigid discipline, but through stories of cosmic heroes and villains, their moral education inseparable from the greater narrative of existence. The family gathers for a shared meal, but not before ritual, washing of hands, purity extending from the spiritual to the physical realm. No food is consumed without a brief prayer of gratitude to the earth that provided it. Even eating becomes a sacrament, a recognition of dependence on forces greater than oneself. As evening approaches, you witness another ritual at the day's opposite threshold. Again, facing the dying light, prayers are offered as darkness descends, not in fear, but in defiance, a daily recommitment to standing firm against the encroaching shadows. In their seasonal celebrations, you observe how the agricultural calendar and spiritual observances merge seamlessly. The 6 major Gahambar festivals mark transitions between seasons, celebrating both divine creation and human cultivation. Nothing exists in isolation. The cosmic and mundane dance together in perfect synchronicity. Each morning and night, as you watch these ancient people lie down to rest, you recognize how their entire existence forms an unbroken ritual. Breaths offered as prayers, dreams as conversations with the divine, each heartbeat a small victory in the eternal struggle between being and non-being. Each small act became a battle in the cosmic war, each kind word a prayer, just as each breath you take now carries you deeper into tranquility. The dusty road stretches before you like an artery of civilization, one small segment of the royal road that spans from Sardis to Susa, an engineering marvel stretching over 600 miles across the Persian Empire. Messengers gallop past on perfectly bred horses, bearing the words of King Darius across distances once thought impossible to bridge. The truth bearer goes by imperial protection, a concept born from Zoroastrian respect for truth as a cardinal virtue. You stand now in Persepolis, the ceremonial heart of the Achaemenid Empire. The immense staircases and columns of the Apadana rise before you, their capitals adorned with hybrid beasts, bulls with human faces and eagles' wings, symbolic guardians embodying strengths of different creatures in harmony. In this architectural language, you recognize echoes of Zoroastrian cosmic order made manifest in stone. Though never declared the official state religion, Zoroastrianism flows through the imperial veins like blood, invisible yet essential. Cyrus, the Great, hailed in the Hebrew Bible as a liberator, carries forth Zoroastrian ethics in his approach to conquered peoples. You watch as he not only tolerates their religions but actively protects them, the famous Cyrus Cylinder declaring rights for diverse faiths across his domain. In royal inscriptions carved into mountainsides, kings invoke Ahura Mazda as their divine patron. Yet these same rulers pragmatically allow local deities and practices to continue, creating a pluralistic empire held together by roads and respect rather than forced conformity. This tension between spiritual certainty and political pragmatism vibrates throughout imperial governance. You witness the gradual transformation as Persian words and concepts seep into other traditions. In distant corners of the empire, ideas of cosmic dualism, resurrection, last judgment, and heaven and hell begin to influence Hebrew thought during the Babylonian exile. These concepts, once revolutionary, start their long journey toward becoming fundamental components of Judaism, Christianity, and eventually Islam. The imperial expansion creates unprecedented cultural exchange. In the markets of Great Persian cities, you overhear merchants from India discussing philosophical concepts with Greeks, creating syncretistic understandings that would have been impossible without the Persian bridges between worlds. Ideas travel the royal road alongside goods and messengers. Yet as you stand in the shadow of imperial grandeur, you sense the inherent contradiction. How can a religion emphasizing individual moral choice align with imperial ambition? The simple wisdom of the wandering prophet now adorns gold coins and justifies power. Court magi, Zoroastrian priests, perform rituals before military campaigns, blessing weapons of destruction in the name of the creator god. As night falls over Persepolis, you watch royal attendants carefully tend sacred fires in golden vessels. The flames that once burned in simple shepherds' dwellings now illuminate palace walls, their light reflecting off precious metals and polished stone. The teaching remains, but its context has transformed utterly, for better and worse. Empires rise like slow breaths and fall like exhales, but the ideas they carry drift on like dreams. The libraries of Persepolis burn around you, flames consuming centuries of accumulated wisdom. Alexander's forces, intoxicated with victory and wine, have set the ceremonial capital ablaze. As roof beams collapse, you witness countless manuscripts reduced to ash, Zoroastrian texts written on perishable materials vanishing forever. What will survive is only what has been memorized by the priests, passed down through oral tradition. Later, standing in the ruins after Alexander's death, you observe the fragmentation of his empire and the Seleucid rulers who followed. Greco-Roman deities and philosophy gain prominence, while Zoroastrian tradition retreats to the periphery, maintained primarily in remote villages and by families determined to preserve ancient ways. Centuries pass in moments as you witness the Sasanian Empire restore Zoroastrianism to official prominence, only to face the Arab conquests of the 7th century CE. The Muslim armies sweep through Persia with religious fervor equal to that of any who came before. You stand beside Zoroastrian families, faced with impossible choices: conversion, death, or exodus. In a mountain village, you watch as priests hurriedly conceal sacred texts in caves, hoping some fragment of their tradition might survive the approaching forces. The distinct sound of prayer turns to whispers as public worship becomes dangerous. Fire temples, once centers of community life, are extinguished or converted to mosques. The eternal flames, meant to burn uninterrupted, flicker and die across the land. Some choose the path of exile. You witness families gathering only their most precious possessions, including sacred fires carried in metal containers, and beginning the dangerous journey toward the Indian subcontinent. The wind carries their tears as they look back at ancestral lands for the final time. Those who remain face increasing pressure. Special taxes burden Zoroastrian communities. Distinctive clothing marks them as non-Muslims, and social restrictions limit their movements and opportunities. In homes where Zoroastrian practices continue, rituals move from courtyards to inner rooms, from daylight to darkness. You stand beside a priest as he secretly transcribes ancient hymns from memory, his hands trembling with age and urgency. Each word preserved is an act of resistance. Each ritual maintained is a victory against obliteration. The tradition that once spanned an empire now survives in fragments. disconnected communities maintaining what they can of the ancient wisdom. Yet even as external expressions diminish, the internal flame burns on. In hidden sanctuaries, you witness the stubborn persistence of faith. Children still learn the mantra of good thoughts, good words, good deeds, though they must practice this wisdom within increasingly narrow confines. Over centuries, communities dwindle through conversion, emigration, and restrictions on marriage. What began as the dominant religion of an empire becomes the faith of a persecuted minority. Yet those who remain develop a fierce commitment to preservation, their very existence a testament to the endurance of Zoroaster's vision. In darkness, the smallest flames become most precious, each memory preserved like an ember waiting to reignite. The shoreline of Gujarat appears on the horizon as you sail alongside Zoroastrian refugees arriving in India in the 10th century. Weary from their journey but determined to preserve their faith, these people, soon to be known as Parsis, petition the local ruler for sanctuary. In a legend that captures their approach to their new home, the leader of the refugees is offered a full cup of milk, symbolizing a land with no room for newcomers. In response, he dissolves sugar into the milk without spilling a drop, promising that his people will sweeten their new homeland without displacing anyone. Centuries compress, and you now stand in modern Mumbai, watching Parsi families gather at the towers of silence for funeral rites, though changing sensibilities and urban restrictions have modified these practices. The community has become known for its business acumen, philanthropic work, and contributions to Indian society far beyond their small numbers. Names like Tata, Godrej, and Wadia have become synonymous with enterprise and charity. In quiet fire temples throughout the city, priests tend sacred flames that have burned continuously since their arrival from Persia, physical links to an ancient homeland. You observe practices virtually unchanged since Zoroaster's time. Prayer 5 times daily facing a fire or light source. The Kusti ritual of untying and retying a sacred cord around the waist. The careful washing before prayer. Across the world, in small communities from London to Los Angeles, Vancouver to Sydney, Zoroastrian diaspora communities maintain their traditions while adapting to modern environments. You witness debates within these communities about conversion, whether to accept members who marry outside the faith, whether to welcome converts at all. The demographic challenge is real. Some estimates place the worldwide Zoroastrian population at fewer than 200,000 ton. In Iran itself, a small community of perhaps 25,000 Zoroastrians remains, practicing their faith with greater freedom than in previous centuries, but still facing limitations. You stand beside them in fire temples rebuilt after centuries of destruction, watching young people negotiate the complex interplay between ancient identity and contemporary Iranian citizenship. The digital age brings new possibilities for preservation and connection. You observe scattered communities linking through websites and online forums, sharing resources and discussing interpretations of texts. Ancient prayers are recorded and distributed, ensuring pronunciation and melodies aren't lost to time. Priests, separated by oceans, consult on ritual questions through video calls. Despite these adaptations, fundamental challenges remain. You sit with Zoroastrian elders worried about declining birth rates and increasing intermarriage. The faith that once claimed millions now faces an uncertain demographic future. Yet in their concern, you also witness remarkable resilience. The same determined spirit that preserved the tradition through centuries of persecution now confronts the challenges of modernity. In community centers from Mumbai to Chicago, you watch children learn the basics of their heritage, often juggling this ancient identity with thoroughly modern lives. The simplicity of good thoughts, good words, good deeds provides an ethical framework that travels across contexts and centuries with surprising adaptability. Time folds like soft fabric, connecting ancient hands to modern ones through unbroken ritual. The Land Rover bounces along the rutted dirt road in the Iranian countryside, kicking up dust that hangs golden in the late afternoon light. Behind the wheel sits a woman whose passion for understanding has brought her thousands of miles from the comfortable academic halls of London. Professor Mary Boyce peers through her windshield at the distant village, barely visible against the mountainside, another remote outpost where ancient practices might still survive intact. It is 1963, and Boyce has embarked on a journey few Western academics would attempt, living among traditional Zoroastrian communities in Iran, not as a detached observer, but as a participant in their daily rhythms. You watch as she is welcomed into a modest home in the village of Sharifabad, removing her shoes before crossing the threshold into a space where practices dating back millennia continue uninterrupted. The texts alone aren't enough, she explained to skeptical colleagues before departing Cambridge. We must see how the living tradition interprets and embodies them. This conviction guides her as she rises before dawn with the family, observing their morning prayers with scholarly attention and growing personal reverence. Through Boyce's keen eyes, you notice details previous scholars missed: the precise manner of feeding a sacred fire, the subtle variations in prayer based on time and occasion, the integration of pre-Zoroastrian elements that academic study of texts alone could never reveal. Her notebook fills with observations. Her camera captures rituals no outsider had previously documented. In the evenings, village elders who initially viewed her with suspicion gradually open up, sharing stories passed down through generations. You observe her listening intently to accounts of persecution during the Islamic conquest, family histories stretching back centuries, and interpretations of sacred texts that differ from conventional academic understanding. When invited to participate in seasonal festivals, Boyce sets aside academic detachment. She joins in ritual meals, learns proper methods of ritual cleansing, and experiences the emotional resonance of ceremonies that connect practitioners to 3,000 years of continuous tradition. Her willingness to engage transforms her from observer to trusted confidant. Returning to academic life, Boyce brings something precious back with her. Not just field notes and photographs, but a lived understanding that transforms Zoroastrian scholarship. You watch as she meticulously organizes her materials, challenging prevailing theories with evidence from living practice. Her landmark work, A History of Zoroastrianism, begins to take shape, destined to become the definitive modern study of the faith. Critics accuse her of going native, of losing scholarly objectivity. You see her respond not with defensive academic language, but with the quiet confidence of someone who has glimpsed a truth others have missed. To understand a religion, she writes, one must approach it with respect for what it means to believers themselves. In her later years, as Iranian revolution makes return visits impossible, Boyce maintains correspondence with the families who welcomed her. When manuscripts and artifacts face new threats, her international reputation helps preserve treasures that might otherwise be lost. The scholar has become advocate, the observer guardian. Before her death in 2006, you see Boyce complete what she began in those dusty Iranian villages, a comprehensive documentation of a tradition teetering on extinction. Her books line library shelves worldwide, ensuring that even if the living tradition were to fade, its wisdom and practices would remain accessible to future generations. She walked between worlds, academic halls and ancient shrines, as we now walk between consciousness and dreams. The circular structure rises from the barren hillside outside Yazd, its white walls stark against the brown landscape. From a distance, it might be mistaken for a fortress or watchtower, but as you approach, the dakma, known in English as a Tower of Silence, its true purpose becomes clear. This is where the Zoroastrian community has for centuries brought their dead, honoring the ancient prohibition against contaminating the sacred elements of earth, fire, and water with corpses. Standing at the base of the tower, you observe its ingenious design, a circular wall surrounding an exposed central platform divided into 3 concentric rings. The outermost section is reserved for men, the middle for women, and the innermost for children. A single door faces east, toward the rising sun, through which funeral bearers, nasellas, would carry the deceased after ritual washing and prayers. In the nearby prayer house, you witness the community gathered for funeral rites. A dog is brought before the body, an ancient practice believed to detect lingering life force and drive away evil spirits. Priests recite from the Avesta, while family members maintain a respectful distance, their tears balanced by the conviction that death is merely a transition, not an end. The actual exposure ritual hasn't been practiced here since the 1970s. Modern regulations and changing sensibilities led to its discontinuation. Yet elderly members of the community remember when the nasellas, members of a specialized class who handled the impurity of death, would carry bodies up the narrow staircase inside the tower wall. They alone would witness the final placement of the deceased on stone beds, retreating quickly to minimize contact with death's pollution. Nature would then complete what humans began. Vultures, considered sacred in this context for their role in the purification process, would descend upon the platform, stripping flesh from bone in a matter of hours. This seemingly brutal practice emerged from profound ecological wisdom and spiritual conviction, returning human elements to the natural cycle without polluting the earth through burial, or the air through cremation. When only bones remained, you would have seen the nasellas return after sufficient time had passed. Using special tools to avoid direct contact, they would collect the sun-bleached bones and deposit them in the central ossuary pit, where rainwater and charcoal would gradually dissolve them, completing the process of returning human remains to nature without contaminating sacred elements. In modern Yazd, you stand beside Iranian Zoroastrians as they visit these now empty towers, monuments to a practice they've reluctantly abandoned. Many express complex emotions: respect for ancient wisdom, understanding of why such practices cannot continue in the modern world, and determination to honor the principles behind the practice even as its form changes. Contemporary Zoroastrians in Iran now use cement burial vaults designed to prevent direct contact between bodies and earth. In India, some Parsi communities have installed solar concentrators in their dakmas to accelerate decomposition, as vulture populations have declined due to environmental factors. Others have reluctantly adopted cremation, previously considered deeply taboo. You observe an elderly priest explaining to younger community members how the ancient practice embodied Zoroastrian principles: respect for natural elements, recognition of death's impurity, and ecological consciousness millennia before such concepts became mainstream. Though the towers stand empty, the values they represented continue to inform community practices. The towers stand silent now, monuments to a different understanding of life's final chapter as you approach the borders of sleep. The sound of a piano intro cuts through the air, followed by a voice of extraordinary range and emotional power. On stage at Wembley Stadium before 72,000 fans, Farrokh Bulsara, known worldwide as Freddie Mercury, commands the attention of millions watching Live Aid in July 1985. Few in the audience know that the man delivering this iconic performance carries within him the heritage of one of the world's oldest religions. Born in Zanzibar in 1946 to Parsi Zoroastrian parents, young Farrokh's earliest memories include standing before a sacred fire in domestic rituals his family maintained, even far from the main centers of Zoroastrian practice. You glimpse him as a child in Stone Town, wearing the sudre, sacred shirt, and kusti, sacred cord, given during his Navyot initiation ceremony at age 7, symbols of his entrance into the religious community. His childhood education at St. Peter's boarding school near Bombay, now Mumbai, places him in proximity to India's largest Parsi community. You observe his dual existence, maintaining traditional Parsi customs at home while absorbing British educational traditions at school. This cultural hybridity would later inform his artistic persona, comfortable moving between worlds and identities as his musical career develops and he adopts the stage name Freddie Mercury. His relationship with his religious heritage becomes increasingly complex. He rarely discusses his Zoroastrian background publicly, yet never formally abandons it. You notice subtle references. His stage costumes sometimes incorporate Zoroastrian symbolism, particularly the Faravahar winged symbol representing the guardian spirit. His parents maintain their faith while supporting their son's unconventional career path. In their London home, traditional ceremonies continue alongside proud displays of their son's gold records. The fundamental Zoroastrian virtues of honesty and charity find expression in Mercury's legendary generosity to friends and causes, even as his public persona seems far removed from the religion's conservative social expectations. When AIDS claims his life in 1991, his Zoroastrian identity returns to prominence. You stand solemnly among mourners at his funeral, conducted according to Zoroastrian rites by a traditional priest. His body draped in white, prayers from the Avesta are recited, the same prayers spoken over the faithful for 3 millennia. Though his life embodied seeming contradictions, in death he returns to the traditions of his ancestors. After the public knows of his passing, you witness the transformation of his Garden Lodge home in Kensington into a spontaneous shrine. Among the flowers and tributes left by fans are occasional Zoroastrian symbols placed by Parsi admirers, proud of this connection to their ancient faith. The man who rarely spoke of his religion in life becomes, in death, one of its most famous adherents. His substantial estate continues to support not only AIDS research but also Zoroastrian causes and other charities. The Zoroastrian principle of charitable works extending beyond his lifetime. The quiet philanthropy that characterized his private life, contrasting with his flamboyant stage persona, reflects the Zoroastrian emphasis on good deeds as the measure of a life well lived. Decades after his death, you observe how Mercury's complex identity creates opportunities for a little-known religion to reach new audiences. Documentaries about his life inevitably touch on his Zoroastrian background, introducing millions to a faith they might otherwise never encounter. Young Zoroastrians point to him as evidence their ancient tradition remains vital and relevant in the modern world. His voice fades now, like all earthly sounds must, leading us gently toward our final reflection. And now you drift back to your bed, leaving behind the ancient landscapes and sacred fires of Zoroaster's world. The weight of millennia settles softly around you like a comfortable blanket, familiar yet changed by the journey we've taken together. Perhaps you recognize now how the ancient prophet's vision continues to echo through time, not just in the small communities still practicing his faith, but in the moral architecture of civilizations that followed. The stark division between good and evil, the individual's responsibility to choose righteousness, the promise of ultimate justice, these concepts that seem so fundamental to modern religious thought were once revolutionary innovations brought forth in the Bronze Age mind of a visionary whose name has never been forgotten. When you sort your recycling or make environmentally conscious choices, you participate in a modern expression of the ancient Zoroastrian reverence for the elements. When you struggle with questions of why good people suffer or why evil seems to prosper, you wrestle with the same cosmic questions Zoroaster addressed through his dualistic framework. The language changes, the contexts evolve, but the fundamental human search for meaning continues unbroken. In those moments between choices when you pause to consider the right path, remember the simplicity and profound depth of good thoughts, good words, good deeds. This ethical compass that guided Persian villagers 3,000 years ago retains its power to orient us still. The cosmic battle Zoroaster described continues within each human heart, not just between abstract forces of light and darkness, but in the 1,000 daily decisions that accumulate to form a life. As you sink deeper into comfort, know that rest itself is honored in this ancient wisdom. The rhythm of activity and renewal, of creation and restoration, forms an essential balance. The same tradition that valued active righteousness also understood the sacred nature of renewal. Perhaps tomorrow, when you see the first light of dawn breaking through your window, you might recall the Zoroastrian greeting to the rising sun, not as worship of the star itself, but in recognition of the light that makes life possible, the illumination that allows both literal sight and metaphorical understanding. Until then, let dreams carry you as gently as this voice has carried you through time. May your thoughts be good, your words be true, and your deeds bring healing to all they touch. In the quiet space between wakefulness and sleep, know that you too participate in the ancient, ongoing struggle to increase light and diminish darkness in our shared world. Rest now, in peace and with purpose. Until we meet again, in this twilight space where ancient wisdom touches modern minds, I remain your guide through time and consciousness. Good night.